Welcome, Gunrunner.
Released on the 11th of September 1995, the long-promised Jaguar CD finally hit the market at a price of $149, £129 in the UK, as an add-on for Atari's already struggling 64-bit Jaguar console. Atari hoped it would help turn the tide on the Sega Saturn and Sony PlayStation, and the early signs were good, as the initial production of 20,000 units sold out within 2 weeks, and a second batch was then ordered. However, it's unknown if that second batch ever went into production or what the size of it was, as Atari went into the reverse merger with JT Storage just 6 months later, liquidating all Jaguar's stock. Many people who worked for the company believe that the original 20,000 units were the only ones that were ever made, and this would certainly explain why the system is now so rare. This means the Jaguar CD never got the life it deserved, and only gave us a brief glimpse at what could have been. But in more recent years we've begun to see what the system could do, and it's become highly sought after by collectors despite the efforts of online influencers like the Angry Video Game Nerd, who try to present it as an awful joke. Having owned one since the day it was released, I've always been a big advocate of the Jaguar CD, and this is a video that I've been itching to make. Last time I featured the Jaguar CD in an Amazing Facts poll, it narrowly lost to the Fairchild Channel F. But no such issues this time, as it romped home with the biggest vote share I've ever seen in one of these polls. I'm glad to see that you all wanted this one as much as me. And if you're new to the channel and might not know, yes, I have already covered the Jaguar console itself, and that Amazing Facts video is linked down in the description for those who missed out. But I don't want to witter on too much in this intro, and would rather let the tantalising trivia speak for itself. So without further ado, I proudly present 10 amazing Atari Jaguar CD facts.
Just what is it that you want to do?
We're going to have a good time.
Let's start off with a pretty simple and straightforward fact, but one that gets more interesting the more you think about it. And this tidbit of trivia surrounds the production of the Jaguar CD unit itself, which was of course manufactured by Dutch company Philips Electronics. Now this in itself might not seem that interesting, but as I already said, it becomes more fascinating the more you think about it. Firstly, there is the issue of Atari's own all-American advertising, where they proudly boasted about the Jaguar being an American console that was manufactured in the USA by another all-American company in IBM no less, even if it was actually designed in England. They even put American flags on the console box to push this boast, but it seems they had forgotten all about this by the time the Jaguar CD was released, choosing a company from the Netherlands to handle things instead. But why Philips, I hear you ask? Well, it doesn't seem to be that well known these days, but Philips were actually the co-creator of the compact disc standard, along with Sony. So it made perfect sense to approach a company that was already an expert at producing CD players. But what is strange about this choice is that Philips were actually a rival to Atari within the multimedia console space, with their own CDI. The Jaguar CD was attempting to copy many of the features that the CDI innovated, like photo CD, video CD and online capabilities, so why would Philips choose to help somebody who would potentially take away sales from their own console? That's never really been made clear, but it's certainly something to ponder over. I'm going to lead straight on from that first fact with this one, because it's quite closely related, and it's all about the Jaguar CD's rather unusual data storage that became a big boast in the advertising for the add-on with its 790 megabytes tagline. You see, when designing the Jaguar CD, Atari and Philips made the decision to store all data as audio on the CDs themselves, which would massively increase the size of the games on offer. Just for comparison, the rival 3DO, which stored the information on its CDs as data rather than audio, was limited to a maximum of 650 megabytes. The PlayStation 1 and Saturn were also pretty similar. Now this might sound like the Jaguar CD had a big advantage in this area, but the problem was that there was a vastly reduced error checking when reading audio CDs, meaning that Jag CD games were far more prone to read errors. This is one reason for the great myth that the Jaguar CD is unreliable. It wasn't so much the hardware, but the way it worked. And when you combined this with a very finicky cartridge slot that would return a red screen of death if you just looked at it funny, you often needed a bit of patience if you wanted to play and enjoy your Jaguar CD, something the angry video game nerd famously doesn't possess. However, there was one last benefit to this format, and that was piracy protection, something that always plagued CD systems. While the Jaguar CD itself was multi-region, like the console, and had no copy protection of any kind at all for its discs, the fact that they were audio discs and not data CDs made them harder to copy. This is because the faster you burn a disc, the more likely you are to have small errors. On a data disc, these don't cause so much of a problem. When reading data as audio with a very small margin of error, this causes huge problems, with the slightest little blemish making the CD unusable. The Jaguar CD would also only read certain types of CDR2, generally darker coloured ones like verbatim, which many potential pirates wouldn't know. So if you own a Jaguar CD and want to burn some games, then get yourself some very high quality dark CDRs and don't burn at more than 4 times speed if you want to have any degree of success. Shortly after the release of the Jaguar CD add-on in 1995, Atari Corporation announced they would also be releasing an all-in-one version of the 64-bit system known as the Jaguar Duo. This new compact console will be along the same lines as other combination consoles like the NEC Turbo Duo and JVC Wonder Mega, which put together the Mega Drive and Mega CD, and this would save potential new owners from having to buy both the console and the add-on, saving them both money and shelf space at the same time. Atari first announced this console in the press of the era, but a mock-up of the unit was also shown at several behind-the-scenes press events, but it was never actually shown working, which certainly suggests that the Jaguar Duo never got beyond the early prototype phase. However, this is where the story gets somewhat mysterious, because there is some evidence that suggests otherwise. There is at least one person who claims to own the Jag Duo case, with no internals, whilst there's another person who owns an actual motherboard. So did the two somehow get separated, or were they actually produced individually and never put together? There are scanned and documented schematics for the motherboard design out there should anyone wish to try and recreate a Jag Duo for themselves. And speaking of somebody who's making their own Jag Duo, there is the Play 1, created by Simon 10p6 Daniel, who's been promising to make these available for people to buy for a very long time now, but has never produced any other than his own units. Shame, as it's certainly a smart bit of kit that would no doubt change hands for a pretty large wad of cash. The Jaguar Duo was due for release in 1996, the same year that Atari officially discontinued their 64-bit console and quit the industry completely, choosing to merge with hard drive manufacturer JTS rather than throw away more money on their failed system. A great shame, as the Jaguar Duo was a pretty sexy looking console. But we're not quite done with unreleased Jaguar CD based consoles, because believe it or not, the Jaguar Duo isn't the only one, as there were actually plans in place for 2 more ways to play Jag CD games, starting with the Sigma Designs PC card, which was widely reported in the press of the time but never actually shown working. This one goes back a bit further than the Duo 2, as the first mentions of Sigma's device were made in mid-1994, just as Atari had finally sorted out the manufacturing issues with IBM and released the Jaguar worldwide. Off the back of this, Atari Corp announced that they were now working with another PC company in the shape of Sigma Designs, who were developing an add-on board that would let PC owners play Jaguar games on their home computers. Sigma stated that this peripheral would work on all 486 PCs and would allow you to play the full range of Jaguar and Jaguar CD games. The latter part of this statement is particularly interesting, as the CD unit had not yet hit the market. Sigma went into more detail on this by stating that their Jaguar PC card included real Magic MPEG compatibility, Although an MPEG card was announced for the Jaguar CD and indeed demoed at various expos, no such add-on was ever released. Sigma had already designed and manufactured various video cards for the PC, so had plenty of expertise in this area. Sigma stated that their product would hit the market in December 1994 at an intended price of £180, but no such device was ever released and there were no further updates on its development. It's unclear if the product even reached the prototype phase, but it's likely that it was cancelled pretty early, as it soon became clear the Jaguar was struggling in the market and the high cost of selling such a device would have made it rather unattractive. Interestingly, very similar devices were developed that allowed PC owners to play both Philips CDI and 3DO games on their computers too, with the latter being released as the Creative Labs 3DO Blaster. Now if you found the thought of the Jaguar Duo or Sigma PC card exciting, you ain't seen nothing yet, as Atari had something else really special up their sleeve, a prototype console that you never really hear people talk about in the form of the mysterious Painter project. And to begin this story we need to go back further still, as the origins of this one actually come from 1992 when Atari released the ill-fated Falcon 030. One of the chief criticisms of this 32-bit computer was around the reuse of the case from its predecessor, the Atari ST. The company soon made it clear that this wasn't the original intention, and they were indeed working on more PC-like designs for the hardware that would especially benefit more serious users. The following year, Atari revealed the Falcon 040 Microbox, a completely redesigned unit that added a built-in CD-ROM drive and a number of other new features. Most notably the ability to lay it flat or use it as a tower. And yes, the story is true, the design was later sold to Sony, who reused it for their PlayStation 2 console. Around this time it was also rumoured that Atari were considering the creation of another home computer that would use the Atari Jaguar hardware, and this wasn't completely untrue, because Atari were in fact developing a new hybrid system under the codename Painter. This ambitious project combined the 32-bit Falcon computer with the 64-bit Jaguar console into a very powerful multimedia system. It included an internal CD-ROM drive with a top opening lid, a floppy disk drive on the front, and 3 rear panel expansion slots. The front panel features the keyboard ports, 2 joystick ports, a Comlinks port, power switch and volume control buttons with a 2-colour LED display panel. As you can see, the housing is very similar to that of the Falcon Microbox, which is why I mentioned it earlier. And it can be placed vertically or horizontally like that unit too. Unfortunately, the Painter project was cancelled just as it reached the prototype phase. There are some mock-up cases out there and even a motherboard, though it's not known if this is fully working or not. So the project certainly got a lot further than the 2 previous entries, but it was never officially announced to the press and no production prototypes were ever shown. It's likely that the Painter project was cancelled when the decision was also made to discontinue the Falcon, so Atari could put all their focus into the Jaguar. A real shame, as this surely would have been an Atari dream machine. Not long after Atari announced their revolutionary 64-bit Jaguar console, they quashed all the queries about why it was using cartridges instead of CDs by revealing that it would be joined by a CD add-on within a year of release, thus going down a similar route to the Sega Mega CD and NEC Super CD-ROM. This would give Jaguar owners the best of both worlds and also allow Atari to refine the new technology and make relevant upgrades in the meantime. The initial specs of the Jaguar CD suggested that it would only offer a few basic upgrades over the existing Jaguar hardware, in the form of additional storage, CD audio and full motion video. But then Atari announced that the CD add-on had been delayed until 1995. There were lots of different stories flying around that explained why, such as the new games not being ready, Atari wanting to build a bigger user base for the console first, and, most interestingly, a need to revise the hardware to enable the Jaguar to better compete with the upcoming Sega Saturn and Sony PlayStation. It was soon being reported that Atari were going to add a new 3D chip into the design of the Jaguar CD. Unlike the Saturn and PlayStation, the Jaguar didn't have any dedicated hardware that was specifically designed to draw polygons, so this new chip would not only fix that, but also include the ability to texture map those polygons too. This would have made perfect sense and seemed like a very sensible decision on Atari's behalf. The Jaguar already had some incredible processing power, and something like this would have undoubtedly left it in a position to compete with its rivals. But then 1995 came round, and the Jaguar CD was ready for release along with the first stream of new CD-based games. The much mooted 3G chip was nowhere to be seen, and the specs of the unit were identical to what was initially announced after the Jaguar's debut. A lot of people criticised this decision, and their initial run of games was doing little to change people's minds. The Jaguar was already selling very poorly, and the Jaguar CD did little to change that, sadly. Interviews with former Flare Technology engineers have revealed that the idea of a 3D chip for the Jaguar CD was briefly considered by Atari, but no such chip would have even been ready for inclusion in the unit. As mentioned earlier in the video, the final design and production for the Jaguar CD had been handed over to Philips Electronics in the Netherlands, and Flare had very little to do with it. Such a chip was being worked on by Flare, however, for inclusion in the planned but ultimately unreleased Jaguar 2 console, so the idea wasn't a complete pipe dream. Without doubt, one of the Jaguar's finest moments was the utterly sublime Tempest 2000. Although it was ported to other platforms later on, the original version remains the best, and was the only one coded by the legendary Jeff Minter himself. In fact, you could argue that the hiring of Minter was Atari's best decision in the Jaguar years. Not only did it bring us the amazing reimagining of Tempest, but also another solid update in Defender 2000. But one could argue that his finest moment with the 64-bit console was the creation of the Jaguar CD's built-in virtual light machine. This amazing piece of software not only allowed you to play and control your music CDs in all the usual ways, it also produced trippy graphics in time to the music you were playing, and remains one of the best reasons to own a Jaguar CD. It was later recreated by Jeff himself for both the VM Labs Nuon and, more significantly, the Xbox 360. An evolution of his own Tripotron and light synthesizer for the Atari ST, VLM used complex algorithms to display graphics on the screen that moved along to the music. The keypad on the Jaguar controller could be used to select different graphical styles or to make your own sequences, but most people just stuck it on random and enjoyed the show. I've actually spoken to a couple of DJs in the UK rave and dance music scene who used the VLM projected onto a giant screen as part of their show, and I know from talking to him this is exactly how Jeff hoped his magical program would be used. In a world where all other CD consoles just had boring music players with nothing other than what you heard to entertain you, the VLM really stood out, and it's a shame that more people didn't get to appreciate just how wonderful it was back then. Earlier on in this video I spoke a little bit about Philips, who undoubtedly kick-started the CD console revolution with their CDI. Although it wasn't really designed as a games machine, more an interactive multimedia machine, but there's no doubting that it provided the template for more games-focused CD-based consoles and add-ons that would follow. A big part of that template was the range of add-ons that would improve its capabilities, such as software to display and edit digital images through the photo CD format, the ability to play film and video CDs with the addition of an MPEG-capable digital video cartridge, and dial-up modem for basic web browsing and other online features. So it probably won't surprise you to learn that all of these things were also planned for the Jaguar CD too. In fact, almost as soon as Atari unveiled the add-on to an expectant press, they showed it playing MPEG quality digital video and the special cartridge that would make this possible. It was also boasted that this would provide the photo CD software too, making it a pretty much essential purchase for all Jag CD owners. However, despite the MPEG cartridge being shown working at expos and events, it was never actually released, and nobody is really sure why. Given it was already using standard video CD and photo CD formats, those who bought it would have had access to a huge range of existing discs to use with it. This seems like an absolute no-brainer, and would have made the Jaguar CD so much more attractive from day one. Why Atari didn't release it is a total mystery, an absolutely baffling decision, but given how many bad decisions the Trammels made at this time, I suppose we shouldn't be surprised. There are a few people who own prototype MPEG cartridges and have reported that they work perfectly, so this wasn't a problem either. There was also the JVM, or Jaguar Voice Modem, that would allow online play, although this was not just for the Jaguar CD and would work with all Jaguar games. Indeed, the Jaguar game Ultra Vortec was actually released with the online mode intact, and you can access it through a special code that you have to input on the keypad. There are quite a few JVM prototypes out there, and people have shown the game working in this way. Other unreleased add-ons include a light gun for use with ports of the American laser games coin-ops like Mad Dog McCree and Space Pirates, as well as a mouse that was supposed to be bundled with the game Baldies, but was withdrawn due to the extra costs involved at last minute, which makes no sense at all, given Atari were just going to use their existing unsold inventory of Atari ST mice. They only had to change the connectors. Again, you can input a code to access the mouse mode on this game if you wish, and it's easy to mod an ST mouse to work with it. The only released Jaguar CD add-on was the memory track cartridge, which was essential if you wanted to save your progress on games. Admittedly, a great device, but not something that would convince people to purchase one. Of all the segments in this video, I think this is the most fascinating one, and a real case of what could have been, because the FMV-based game film concept, which was designed specifically for the Jaguar CD by Atari themselves, was really ahead of its time, and would have changed the way such games were perceived forever. Now, I think we all know that FMV games were nothing new. They'd started in the arcades with Laserdisc games like Dragon's Lair and Space Ace, and then were revived again with the arrival of the Sega Mega CD and games like Night Trap and Sewer Shark. For a short time they were very much seen as the future, hence Sega's heavy focus on them for their own add-on. But the many limitations of FMV quickly became apparent, most notably the very limited amount of interactive elements. A lot of these could barely be called games at all, in fact, they were more like watching a movie. Game film would have changed that, as this revolutionary new way of presenting FMV would have allowed for much more interactivity and a lot more variation too. Created by David M. Schwartz, the game film format allowed for data to be arranged in clips with multiple segments, enabling them to be spliced together seamlessly when played in a series. Using the Jaguar CD's low latency Cinepack format, new segments could be transferred into the console memory very quickly, meaning you wouldn't have to wait for each scene to load. A proof of concept game called Caves of Fear was quickly developed, which hugely impressed the bosses at Atari, who then commissioned several more game film games, including the infamous American Hero, which starred Hollywood actor Timothy Bottoms, most famous for playing George W. Bush on the big screen. American Hero was fully finished and ready for release in early 1996, when Atari cancelled production of all Jaguar and Jaguar CD games and exited the market. A prototype version has since been found and released for everyone to enjoy, as well as an unfinished version of Caves of Fear 2. There is also an interesting subplot to American Hero with a pretty happy ending. After the Jaguar game was cancelled, director Jeff Burr shot some new scenes in a hope of remaking it as a feature film, but since the film negatives were damaged during the cutting phase, it was deemed a loss for the producers at Showcase Entertainment, and this film was cancelled too. But in 2021, Empty Clip Studios and Ziggurat Interactive teamed up to release an official PC version of the game. Restored and remastered, and featuring a newly recorded voiceover by Timothy Bottoms himself, it was released digitally via GOG.com to great rapture from Atari Jaguar fans. Because the Jaguar CD was on the market for such a short amount of time, it only had a tiny official library of just 15 games, and that includes the Mist demo and Tempest 2000 soundtrack CD that came free with the add-on. This didn't exactly make it an attractive prospect for those who were thinking about getting one, even if the likes of Battle Morph, Iron Soldier 2 and Hover Strike and Conquered Lands do rank amongst the Jaguar's very best games. But this situation very much changed in the years after the Jaguar's commercial life, in two different areas. Firstly, there are all the previously unreleased prototypes that were discovered and made available to either download or buy. I already mentioned Caves of Fear and American Hero, but other notable titles include fully playable and mostly complete games like Bret Hart NHL Hockey, Soul Star and Robinson's Requiem, as well as hugely impressive work-in-progress titles like Varuna's Forces, Demolition Man, and most notably, Black Ice White Noise, which has been described as Grand Theft Auto 3 years before the game even existed. If that game had been finished, it could have been a real game changer, and the killer app the Jaguar CD so desperately needed. The other big boon has come in the form of homebrew games, which began to appear in the early noughties. Originally these required a special bypass cartridge to make them play, but once the CD encryption software was discovered on an old Atari Corp hard drive, people were able to encrypt their own CDs. Early more 16-bit like offerings like Jagmania, Gorf and Painter were later succeeded by far more impressive CD titles like Filia, Protector Resurgence and Tube Special Edition. Although it's now finally possible to play CD games via emulation and from the Jaguar game drive, these titles changed the Jaguar CD from a cheap piece of hardware that only interested collectors to a must-have item for all owners, and with it the cost of obtaining a Jag CD went through the roof. I'm just glad I still own my original one that I bought from Silica Shop back in 1995.
This part of the brain controls the subject's emotions.
Hey, get off my lawn!
This part controls hunger.
Hey, you gonna eat that?
This controls sexual impulses. This controls rational thought.
Why would I buy a 32-bit system for $300 when I can get a 64-bit Jaguar system for $149?
Atari Jaguar 64-bit, $149.
Knock it off!
And that rounds up my look at 10 amazing Atari Jaguar CD facts. Which of these facts was your favourite, or do you have any others that you want to add to my list? I also love to hear the thoughts and views of my audience, so please get typing in that comments section. Before I go though, I must thank all of my loyal patrons and YouTube backers for continuing to support my channel and make videos like this possible. However, I must give special thanks to the following people in particular for their much appreciated pledges: D. Vaughan, Albert Davis, Richard Baker, Martin Wiggins, Peter Grantham, Bernard Santu, Mins, Classic Gamer 74, Josh Hartman, Daniel Skronsky, Ben P. Stein, Toby Kitsune, Grady Haynes, Paul Daniel, Seth A. Robinson, Kalimatorn, Carl Olsen, Mark Strickland, Big Chuzzle, Carl Cloping, Black Siren, John Alberino and Electron Star Collapse. If you also want to help support this channel, then you can now join as a member for as little as £2 a month. We will get access to exclusive videos and updates and much more besides. Just click the button on my community page to get started. My Patreon is also still available if you prefer to support me in other ways too. I've been the Laird, and thank you for watching, and I'll see you all again for another video very soon.